David Harbour first played Alexei Shostakov, aka the Red Guardian, in Marvel's prequel film Black Widow, where his character acted like a father figure to Scarlett Johansson's Natasha Romanoff. He picks up the mantle once more for Thunderbolts alongside his on-screen surrogate daughter Yelena Belova, played by Florence Pugh. But how did Harbour get roped into the MCU? Well, the actor admits that Marvel didn't call him up and just offer him the role. When he was in London once, he got a call from his agents that Black Widow director Cate Shortland wants to have lunch and discuss an opportunity with him. Over lunch, she told him about the movie and the script and described the character as a guy who is a father figure and has all these tattoos, and so to him it was a fresh character. After the meeting, he dove into the comic books and saw that the MCU's take on the character is a different version, and he was excited. The cast had a full week of rehearsals before going right into production. This time allowed Harbour and his co-stars, who include Johansson, Pugh, and Rachel Weisz, to rehearse together and discover their characters at the same time. This allowed the actors to add small moments throughout the script that helped flesh out their characters. This also helped the core group establish a unique bond as a family, which they then brought to the screen. A lot of Red Guardian's quirky moments came from these rehearsals, like the scene in which he decides to try on the suit in the bathroom, and they were all born out of Harbour's imagination. Another detail that was born out of his imagination was the American Pie stuff that he and Florson came up with. The scene was already very well written, but he thought, what if they added something a little personal before he left the room? And so they created this backstory for themselves that further grounded their relationship. Shortland let them improvise several scenes, like the dinner scene, in which they talk about Santa Claus. This helped Harbour and his co-stars create their own backstories for their characters outside of the comics, which were just so rich with information. And how did Harbour adapt to Alexei's Russian background? He was a kid during the very end of the Cold War, and Harbour points out that his characterization is not based on real life, but more of a comic book impression. Harbour grew up reading Russian literature in college, like Chekhov and Tolstoy, and books about the communist revolutions. I feel like the essence of communism would be something like sharing or communal brotherhood, he says. And he thought that Alexei is not what communism has become, but he represents the true idea of believing that workers should own their own production. And that's the sort of paradox he brought to his character, a super soldier of the Soviet Republic. Harbour also practiced with a dialect coach to nail a Russian accent for his role. It is important to note, though, that he chose to do a broader and more comic version of the accent since he was the comedic relief character written for Black Widow. Ultimately, this comic side to his character also continued into Thunderbolts, where he happens to maintain it. According to Adriana Nelson, an actress and dialect coach, she says she didn't mind Harbour's attempt because he so fully embraced the Russian swagger, even as the clown, the self-described brawn versus the brains in the group. She did note that he did mispronounce a few short A's, like in the words plan and captain. She mentions that most of his lines, though, he mastered hitting all the right vowel sounds, like in his infamous line, "She was the strategist, I was the muscle." It is possible that Harbour may have received new pages or that something was thrown at him whenever his accent wasn't consistent. Since Red Guardian's second MCU appearance is in Thunderbolts, did Harbour have to practice all over again to play the character? Well, yes and no. Marvel requested that he not bulk up and become muscular to don the red suit again. Instead, he wanted to focus on the dynamic between Alexei and Yelena and make it strong and seem very real, like they are a family. Since Natasha is the center of their family, and with her gone after the events of Avengers Endgame, Harbour began to explore what her death meant to Alexei and how that shaped his father-like character and his relationship with Yelena, but also with the Thunderbolts since he's the oldest of them. So he thought about his own family and how, if he died, that would affect his own family, and brought these ideas into his characterization of Alexei post-Endgame. The family dynamic has more depth and all this pathos. Harbour acknowledges that both his family in Black Widow and the misfit team up in Thunderbolt are like a dysfunctional family coming together that just push each other's buttons, and that became the basis of all the comedy for Alexei. Besides the character preparation, Harbour had to get his body prepared for the role as well. Harbour's trainer, David Higgins, worked with him to help maintain his physique and stay fit for the shoot of Thunderbolts. Higgins first met Harbour when they were working on Black Widow via Scarlett Johansson. Originally, Harbour didn't need a trainer per se, but a flashback scene of the Red Guardian in his prime meant that he had to lose weight, so the two began to collaborate for 10 weeks to do that. The success of their work together meant Harbour brought Higgins on board for Season 4 of Stranger Things, and the rest became history. So, when Harbour finds his character is coming back for another Marvel film, he quickly brings Higgins back to help him train. Higgins likes to push his clients about 60 to 70% of their capacity every day. He takes a more holistic approach rather than just sending his clients to the gym and telling them to lift heavy weights. Higgins put Harbour on an intermittent fasting program diet almost immediately. In order to lose weight, he had to eat less food but eat more of the healthy food groups to nourish his body. Higgins' philosophy behind intermittent fasting is that it helps actors get away from their usual eating habits and make them focus more on what the body actually needs. You very quickly realize you are consuming far more than you actually need, he says. The celeb trainer structured the plan as follows. Harbour would only eat between 12 noon and 8 p.m. As the duo began to see results, Higgins would modify the diet. Harbour was committed. For 4 weeks, he did a 24-hour fast from Sunday evening to Monday night. The longest fast he did was 48 hours a few times, just to see how far he could challenge his body, knowing of the stunts he may have to perform. Thankfully, they saw results very quickly, and Harbour gained benefits like better sleep and greater energy levels. The process was useful given Harbour's age, who is in his mid-40s. In the end, he lost 75 pounds, but the diet and training were only the beginning of the preparation. Harbour's age, though, did pose a challenge for the duo. Over the years, our bodies build up stories, as Higgins calls them, about what they can and cannot do. It's important to overcome these stories and safely start to test the body on how far it can go. Harbour was already proficient at heavy lifting, boxing, and big, powerful movements, but because of that, it has caused him imbalances. He cannot do pull-ups because he can't lift his hands over his head. He can't do deep squats because his knees give out. To overcome this, Higgins worked with Harbour to reopen his body, loosening up the movements he couldn't bring himself to do. They did a lot of Pilates, focused on nutrition, muscle energy techniques, and foam rolling. When Harbour was freed from his body's constraints, he dove into a regimen of heavy lifting on Mondays, following a circuit-based pattern of sets of 6 reps, which would involve chest and shoulder exercises and biceps, triceps, and leg movements. And curious about the rest of his schedule? Well, Tuesdays were a reformer pilot day, which meant Pilates that uses a machine called a reformer, a contraption of ropes and sliding wooden parts to decrease the stress on the joints. Wednesdays were designated for deadlift and squats. Thursdays were for more Pilates. Fridays were a higher rep day with a mixture of workouts. Thanks to David Harbour's dedication to his craft, he delivers one of the MCU's funniest yet most vulnerable characters in not 1 but 2 movies. His perseverance in training his body and mind to take on the physicality of a superhero character proves to audiences just how seriously Harbour takes his craft. And for that, we thank him. Thanks for watching.